Friction. Friction is a force that opposes the motion of an object. That means that it acts in a direction which is opposite of the direction that the object is moving or that it would like to move. Friction arises because of irregularities in the surfaces of objects that are in contact with one another. Even though two objects may appear to be very smooth, if we could magnify them to a high degree, you would see that they're really not smooth, that there are a series of peaks and valleys on the surfaces of these objects, and the interlocking of these peaks and valleys is what prevents or makes it more difficult for the objects to slide across one another. So this is what gives rise to friction. There are two main types of friction: static friction, which is the amount of friction that has to be overcome in order for an object to begin moving, and sliding friction. This would be the friction between an object or two objects that are already moving with respect to one another. Static friction is always higher than sliding friction. It always takes more force to start an object moving than it takes to keep it moving once it begins to move. Another feature of friction is that it acts parallel to the surface. Also, its direction is opposite to the way that the object is moving. Another feature of friction is that it depends on the nature of the materials. For example, friction would be higher between sandpaper and concrete than it would be between sandpaper and glass. So generally, the rougher the surfaces are, the higher the friction will be. Smoothing surfaces tends to reduce friction. However, there's a limit to which this will work, because if two surfaces become very, very smooth, there may actually be some attractive forces that come into play, which could make friction go up. Friction also depends on the force pressing two surfaces together. The greater the force pressing them together, the higher friction will be. One way of measuring friction between two surfaces is to look at what's called the coefficient of friction. Coefficient of friction is a dimensionless number. It's just a number, usually between 0 and 1, although it can be higher than 1. The higher the coefficient of friction, it means the greater the friction. And it is calculated with the equation: coefficient of friction is equal to the frictional force divided by the normal force. The symbol for the coefficient of friction is the Greek letter mu, which looks like a sideways cursive U. F with a little f next to it, sometimes I call this F of F, means the force of friction. And the normal force would be the force that is perpendicular to the weight of the object when it's on a level ground. Normal means perpendicular. So F of n is perpendicular to the surface. This concludes an introduction on the basic facts of friction.